It is related by Cotton Mather that a young woman, named Margaret Rule, belonging to the north part of Boston,
many months after the general storm of the late enchantments was over, when the country had long lain pretty quiet, was seized by the evil angels, both as to molestation and accusations from the invisible world. On the Lord's Day, the 10th of September, 1693, after some hours of previous disturbance of the public assembly, she fell into odd fits, and had to be taken out of the congregation and carried home, where her fits, in a few hours, grew into a figure that satisfied the spectators of their being supernatural. From the 10th of September to the 18th, she kept an entire fast, and yet, she was to all appearance as fresh, as lively, as hearty, at the 9 days' end, as before they began. In all this time she had a very eager hunger upon her stomach, yet if any refreshment were brought unto her, her teeth would be set, and she would be thrown into many miseries. Indeed, once or twice, or so, in all this time, her tormentors permitted her to swallow a mouthful of somewhat that might increase her miseries, whereof a spoonful of rum was the most considerable.
The affair, of course, was noised abroad. It reached the ears of Robert Calef. Calef was a native of England, a young man, residing, first in Roxbury, and afterwards at Boston. He was reputed a person of good sense, and, from the manner in which Cotton Mather alludes to him, in one instance, of considerable means. Not a syllable is on record against his character, outside of his controversy with the Mathers. All that is known of him, on the contrary, indicates that he was an honorable and excellent person. He enjoyed the confidence of the people, and was called to municipal trusts, for which only reliable, discreet, vigilant, and honest citizens were selected, receiving the thanks of the town for his services of the people. Little else is known of Robert Calef, aside from his single book, and what his enemies have thought proper to say about him in a bitter spirit of detraction. He was certainly a man of good education, but how he acquired it, where and when, no mention is found. Mather, in his rejoinder to the more wonders, assails him at every point, but his attainments in literature he probably viewed as not vulnerable, as he has made no attack on that quarter. It is true he accuses him of being assisted in his labors, but gives no clue by which such assistance may be known. On the 13th of September, after sunset, accompanied by some others, he went to the house, drawn, as he says, by curiosity to see Margaret Rule, and so much the rather, because it was reported Mr. Mather would be there. They were taken into the chamber where she was in bed. They found her of a healthy countenance. She was about 17 years of age. Increase and Cotton Mather came in, shortly afterwards, with others. Altogether, there were between 30 and 40 persons in the room. Calef drew up minutes of what was said and done. He repeated his visit, on the evening of the 19th. Cotton Mather had been with Margaret half an hour, and had gone before his arrival. Each night, Calef made written minutes of what was said and done, the accuracy of which was affirmed by the signatures of 2 persons, which they were ready to confirm with their oaths. He showed them to some of Mather's particular friends. Whereupon Mather preached about him, sent word that he should have him arrested for slander, and called him one of the worst of liars. Calef wrote him a letter, on the 29th of September, and, in reference to the complaints and charges Mather was making, proposed that they should meet, in either of 2 places he mentioned, each accompanied by a friend, at which time he, Calef, would read to him the minutes he had taken, of what had occurred on the evenings of the 13th and 19th. Mather sent a long letter, not to be delivered, but read to him, in which he agreed to meet him, as proposed, at one of the places, but, in the meantime, on the complaint of the Mathers, for scandalous libels upon Cotton Mather, Calef was brought before their Majesties' Justice, and bound over to answer at sessions. Mather, of course, failed to give him the meeting for conference, as agreed upon. On the 24th of November, Calef wrote to him again, referring to his failure to meet him and to the legal proceedings he had instituted, and, as the time for appearance in court was drawing near, he thought it not amiss to give a summary of his views on the great concern, as to which they were at issue. He states, at the outset, that there are witches, is not the doubt. Calef keeps to the point, which was not whether there were, or could be, witches, but whether the methods Mather was attempting, in the case of Margaret Rule, and which had been used in Salem, the year before, were legitimate or defensible. He was determined not to suffer the issue to be shifted. Upon receiving this letter, Mather, who probably had begun to doubt about the expediency of a public prosecution, signified that he had no desire to press the prosecution, and renewed the proposal for a conference. Caliph waited on sessions, but no one appearing against him, was dismissed. The affair seemed, at this crisis, to be tending toward an amicable conclusion. But Mather failed to meet him, and, on the 11th of January, Caliph addressed him again, recapitulating what had occurred, sending him copies of his previous letters and also of the minutes he had taken of what occurred on the evenings of the 13th and 19th of September, with these words:
Reverend Sir, finding it necessary, on many accounts, I here present you with the copy of that paper, which has been so much misrepresented, to the end, that what shall be found defective or not fairly represented, if any such shall appear, they may be set right.
This letter concludes in terms which show that, in that stage of the affair, Caliph was disposed to treat Mather with great respect, and that he sincerely and earnestly desired and trusted that satisfaction might be given and taken, in the interview he so persistently sought, not merely in reference to the case of Margaret Rule, but to the general subject of witchcraft, on which they had different apprehensions.
I have reason to hope for a satisfactory answer to him, who is one that reverences your person and office.
This language strikingly illustrates the estimate in which ministers were held. Reverence for their office and for them, as a body, pervaded all classes. On the 15th of January, Mather replied complaining, in general terms, of the narrative contained in Caliph's minutes, as follows:
I do scarcely find any one thing, in the whole paper, whether respecting my father or myself, either fairly or truly represented. The narrative contains a number of mistakes and falsehoods which, were they wilful and designed, might justly be termed great lies.
He then goes into a specification of a few particulars, in which he maintains that the minutes are incorrect. On the 18th of January, Caliph replied, reminding him that he had taken scarcely any notice of the general subject of diabolical agency, but that almost the whole of his letter referred to the minutes of the meetings, on the 13th and 19th of September, and he maintains their substantial accuracy and shows that some of Mather's strictures were founded upon an incorrect reading of them. In regard to Mather's different recollection of some points, he expresses his belief that if his account, in the minutes, be not fully exact, it was as near as memory could bear away. He notices the fact that he finds in Mather's letter no objection to what related to matters of greatest concern. Mather had complained that the minutes reported certain statements made by Rule, which had been used to his disadvantage, and Caliph suggests, what can be expected less from the father of lies, by whom, you judge, she was possessed? Appended to Mather's letter, are some documents, signed by several persons, declaring that they had seen Rule lifted up by an invisible force from the bed to the top of the room, while a strong person threw his whole weight across her, and several others were trying with all their might to hold her down or pull her back. Upon these certificates, Caliph remarks,
Upon the whole, I suppose you expect I should believe it, and if so, the only advantage gained is, that what has been so long controverted between Protestants and Papists, whether miracles are ceased, will hereby seem to be decided for the latter, it being, for aught I can see, if so, as true a miracle as for iron to swim, and the devil can work such miracles.
Caliph wrote to him again, on the 19th of February, once more praying that he would so far oblige him, as to give him his views on the important subjects, for a right understanding of which he had so repeatedly sought a conference and written so many letters, and expressing his earnest desire to be corrected, if in error, to which end, if Mather would not, he indulged a hope that some others would, afford him relief and satisfaction. On the 16th of April, he wrote still another letter. In all of them, he touched upon the points at issue between them, and importuned Mather to communicate his views, fully, as to one seeking light. On the 1st of March, he wrote to a gentleman, an acknowledgment of having received, through his hands,
After more than a year's waiting, from Cotton Mather, for sheets of paper, not to be copied, and to be returned in a fortnight. Upon returning them, with comments, he desires the gentleman to request Mr. Mather not to send him any more such papers, unless he could be allowed to copy and use them.
It seems that, in answer to a subsequent letter, Mather sent to him a copy of Richard Baxter's Certainty of the World of Spirits, to which, after some time, Caliph found leisure to reply, expressing his dissent from the views given in that book, and treating the subject somewhat at large. In this letter, which closes his correspondence with Mather, he makes his solemn and severe appeal.
Though there is reason to hope that these diabolical principles have not so far prevailed, with multitudes of Christians, as that they ascribe to a witch and a devil the attributes peculiar to the Almighty, yet how few are willing to be found opposing such a torrent, as knowing that in so doing they shall be sure to meet with opposition to the utmost, from the many, both of magistrates, ministers, and people, and the name of Sadducee, atheist, and perhaps witch too, cast upon them most liberally, by men of the highest profession in godliness, and, if not so learned as some of themselves, then accounted only fit to be trampled on, and their arguments, though both rational and scriptural, as fit only for contempt. But though this be the deplorable dilemma, yet some have dared, from time to time, for the glory of God and the good and safety of men's lives, etc., to run all these risks. And that God, who has said, "My glory I will not give to another," is able to protect those that are found doing their duty herein against all opposers, and, however otherwise contemptible, can make them useful in his own hand, who has sometimes chosen the weakest instruments that his power may be the more illustrious. And now, Reverend Sir, if you are conscious to yourself that you have, in your principles or practices, been abetting to such grand errors, I cannot see how it can consist with sincerity to be so convinced, in matters so nearly relating to the glory of God and lives of innocents, and, at the same time, so much to fear disparagement among men, as to trifle with conscience and dissemble an approving of former sentiments. You know that word, "He that honoureth me I will honour, and he that despiseth me shall be lightly esteemed." But, if you think that, in these matters, you have done your duty, and taught the people theirs, and that the doctrines cited from the above-mentioned book, Baxter's, are ungainsayable, I shall conclude in almost his words. He that teaches such a doctrine, if through ignorance he believes not what he saith, may be a Christian, but if he believes them, he is in the broad path to heathenism, devilism, popery, or atheism. It is a solemn caution, but though we, or an angel from heaven, preach any other gospel unto you than that which we have preached unto you, let him be accursed. I hope you will not misconstrue my intentions herein, who am, Reverend Sir, yours to command, in what I may.
Resolute in his purpose to bring the ministers to meet the questions he felt it his duty to have considered and settled, and careful to leave nothing undone that he could do, to this end he sought the satisfaction from others, he had tried in vain to obtain from Mather. On the 18th of March, 1695, he addressed a letter to the ministers, whether English, French, or Dutch, calling their attention to the mysterious doctrines relating to the power of the devil, and to the subject of witchcraft. On the 20th of September, he wrote to the Reverend Samuel Willard, invoking his attention to the great concern, and his aid in having it fairly discussed. On the 12th of January, 1696, he addressed the ministers in and near Boston, for the same purpose, and wrote a separate letter to the Reverend Benjamin Wadsworth. The ministers did not give him the satisfaction he sought. They were paralyzed by the influence or the fear of the Mathers. Perhaps they were shocked, if not indignant, at a layman's daring to make such a movement against a minister. It was an instance of the laying of unsanctified hands on the horns of the altar, such as had not been equaled in audacity, since the days of Anne Hutchinson, by any but Quakers. Caliph, however, was determined to compel the attention of the world, if he could not that of the ministers of Boston, to the subject, and he prepared, and sent to England, to be printed, a book, containing all that had passed, and more to the same purpose. It consists of several parts. Part 1, is an account of the afflictions of Margaret Rule, written by Cotton Mather, under the title of Another Brand Plucked Out of the Burning, or More Wonders of the Invisible World. Part 3, is a brief account of the parish troubles, at Salem Village. Part 4 is a correspondence between Caliph and a gentleman, whose name is not given, on the subject of witchcraft, the latter maintaining the views then prevalent. Part 5 is an impartial account of the most memorable matters of fact, touching the supposed witchcraft in New England, including the report of the trials given by Mather in his Wonders of the Invisible World. The work is prefaced by an epistle to the reader, couched in plain but pungent language, in which he says,
It is a great pity that the matters of fact, and indeed the whole, had not been done by some abler hand, better accomplished, and with the advantages of both natural and acquired judgment, but, others not appearing, I have enforced myself to do what is done. My other occasions will not admit any further scrutiny therein.
A postscript contains some strictures on the life of Sir William Phipps, then recently printed, which book, Caliph says, though it bear not the author's name, yet the style, manner, and matter are such, that, were there no other demonstration or token to know him by, it were no witchcraft to determine that Mr. Cotton Mather is the author of it. The real agency of Sir William Phipps, in demolishing, with one stern blow, the court of Oyer and Termine, and treading out the witchcraft prosecutions, has never been well known. Caliph speaks of Sir William, kindly.
It is not doubted but that he aimed at the good of the people, and great pity it is that his government was so sullied, for want of better information and advice from those whose duty it was to have given it, by the hobgoblin monster, witchcraft, whereby this country was nightmared and harassed, at such a rate as is not easily imagined.
Such were the contents, and such the tone, of Caliph's book. The course he pursued, his carefulness to do right and to keep his position fortified as he advanced, and the deliberate courage with which he encountered the responsibilities connected with his movement to rid the country of a baleful superstition, are worthy of grateful remembrance. Mather received intelligence that Caliph had sent his book to England, to be printed, and his mind was vehemently exercised in reference to it. He set apart the 10th of June, for a private fast on the occasion, and he commenced the exercise of the day, by, first of all, declaring unto the Lord that he freely forgave Caliph, and praying the Lord also to forgive him. He pleaded with the Lord, saying that the design of this man was to hurt his precious opportunities of glorifying his glorious Lord Jesus Christ. He earnestly besought that those opportunities might not be damnified by Caliph's book. On the 5th of November, Caliph's book having been received in Boston, Mather again made it the occasion of fasting and praying. His friends also spent a day of prayer, as he expresses it, to complain unto God, against Caliph. The entries in his diary, at this time, show that he was exasperated, to the highest degree, against Caliph, to whom he applies such terms as, a liar, vile, infamous, imputing to him diabolical wickedness. He speaks of him as a weaver, and, in a pointed manner calls him Calf, a mode of spelling his name sometimes practiced, but then generally going out of use. It is unnecessary to say that a fling at a person's previous occupation, or that of his parents, an attempt to discredit him, in consequence of his having, at some period of his life, been a mechanic or manufacturer, or dropping, or altering a letter in his name, does not amount to much, as an impeachment of his character and credibility, as a man or an author. Hard words, too, in a heated controversy, are of no account whatever. In this case, it was a vain and empty charge, for Mather to call Caliph a liar. In the matter of the account, the latter drew up, of what took place in the chamber of Margaret Rule, as he sent it to Mather for correction, and as Mather specified some items which he deemed erroneous, his declaration that all the rest was a tissue of falsehoods, was utterly futile, and can only be taken as an unmeaning and ineffectual expression of temper. So far as the truthfulness of Caliph's statements, generally, is regarded, there is no room left for question. A committee of 7, including John Goodwin, was appointed for this purpose. They called upon their pastors to furnish them with materials. The committee drew up, as Mather informs us, in his diary, a handsome answer unto the slanders and libels of our slanderous adversary, which was forthwith printed, with the names of the members of the committee signed to it. This vindication is mainly devoted to the case of the Goodwin children, 12 years before, and to a defense of the course of increase Mather, in England, in reference to the old and new charters. No serious attempt was made to controvert material points in Caliph's book, relating to Salem witchcraft. As it would have been perfectly easy, by certificates without number, to have exposed any error, touching that matter, and as no attempt of the kind was made, on this or any other occasion, the only alternative left is to accept Hutchinson's conviction, that Caliph was a fair relater of that passage in our history. His book has, therefore, come down to us, bearing the undeniable stamp of truth. It was so regarded, at the time, in England, as shown in the manner in which it was referred to by Francis Hutchinson and Daniel Neal, and in America, in the way in which Thomas Hutchinson speaks of Caliph, and alludes to matters as stated by him. Caliph's book continues to this day to be the recognized authority on the subject. Its statements of matters of fact, not disputed nor specifically denied by the parties affected, living at the time, nor attempted to be confuted, then, and by them, never can be. The current of more than 3 centuries has borne them beyond all question. No assault can now reach them. It may be safely said that few publications have produced more immediate or more lasting effects. It killed off the whole business of Margaret Rule. Mather abandoned it altogether. In 1694, he said the forgetting thereof would neither be pleasing to God nor useful to men. Before Caliph had done with him, he had dropped it forever. Caliph's book put a stop to all such things, in New and Old England. It struck a blow at the whole system of popular superstition, relating to the diabolical world, under which it reels to this day. It drove the devil out of the preaching, the literature, and the popular sentiments of the world. No one can appreciate the value of his service. If this one brave man had not squarely and defiantly met the follies and madness, the priestcraft and fanaticism of his day. If they had been allowed to continue to sway courts and juries, if the pulpit and the press had continued to throw combustibles through society, and in every way inflame the public imaginations and passions, what limit can be assigned to the disastrous consequences?